I think it was the blessing and the curse, to sort of finally understand what was happening so that I can be into the acceptance of what is.
At 70, Bruce Willis' family has finally admitted what we all feared.
At 70 years old, Bruce Willis, the man who made the world laugh, cheer, and shout yippee-ki-yay, is no longer the action hero we once knew. His family has finally confirmed what millions fear. Bruce can no longer speak, can no longer read, can no longer walk. This is not the Hollywood ending fans prayed for. This is real life. And for Bruce Willis, the fight is no longer against terrorists in a skyscraper or asteroids hurtling toward Earth. It's against a disease that strips away memory, language, and identity.
When they say that this is a family disease, it really is.
Earlier this year in April, the family gave a public update saying that while Bruce's illness is progressing, his condition is stable, and their love for him is unwavering.
A cruel twist of fate for a man whose very voice defined a generation of cinema. But here's the truth the world doesn't know. This nightmare didn't begin with aphasia. It didn't even begin with dementia. No, Bruce's battle began more than 3 decades ago, in 1991, with one bold decision that made Hollywood turn its back on him. From that moment on, he wasn't just an actor, he was a threat to the system. And the machine made sure he paid for it. Tonight, we go back. We rewind to the rise, the rebellion, and the painful fall of Bruce Willis. From untouchable superstar to blacklisted outsider. From billion-dollar box office king to a man exploited in his final years. This is the untold story of how Bruce Willis went from Hollywood's brightest light to the silence we see today. But before we dive in, make sure you hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment with your favorite Bruce Willis role. Because once you hear this story, you'll never see him or Hollywood the same way again. Before the silence, before the illness, Bruce Willis was unstoppable. Born on a U.S. Army base in West Germany, raised in New Jersey, Bruce was never the polished Hollywood type. He was the everyman, the wisecracking bartender who hustled his way into auditions and stumbled onto a stage that was never supposed to be his. In the mid-1980s, that charm landed him Moonlighting, a quirky TV detective series that turned him into a household name. But television was just the launchpad. In 1988, when Die Hard exploded into theaters, Bruce Willis rewrote the rulebook for action heroes. He wasn't a muscle-bound superhero like Schwarzenegger or Stallone. He was regular, flawed, sarcastic, terrified. And that made him believable. John McClane wasn't just a character, he was Bruce Willis. Overnight, Hollywood crowned him king. Studios threw blank checks his way. Die Hard 2 raked in nearly $250 million worldwide. He was pulling $15 to $20 million a film, more than Tom Cruise, more than Harrison Ford. For a brief moment, Bruce Willis was untouchable. But beneath the success, Bruce carried a dream. Long before Die Hard, he'd scribbled notes about a story that obsessed him. A singing cat burglar who cracked jokes while pulling heists. It wasn't Hollywood's idea, it was his. And when the money started rolling in, Bruce used his star power to make it happen.
That passion project became Hudson Hawk. Not just another movie, but Bruce's baby. He co-wrote the story, handpicked the director, and demanded control over the entire production. For the first time, an actor wasn't just cashing checks. He was calling the shots. And that's when the machine took notice. Because in Hollywood, stars are meant to perform, not to create. Bruce Willis had crossed an invisible line, and the punishment was about to begin. May 24th, 1991. Hudson Hawk hit theaters across America and bombed harder than anyone could have imagined. The budget had spiraled out of control, from $42 million to nearly $70 million, thanks to Bruce's endless rewrites, on-set power plays, and lavish demands. What was supposed to be a quirky, stylish comedy turned into a chaotic mess. On opening weekend, it scraped together just $7.9 million. By the end of its run, the movie had bled nearly $90 million. The reviews? Brutal. Rolling Stone called it unspeakably awful. The New York Times dismissed it as colossally sour and ill-conceived. But the true damage wasn't on the screen. It was behind the scenes, in Hollywood's boardrooms, where whispers about Bruce Willis began to spread. This wasn't just a flop. It was a challenge to the system. Bruce wasn't content to be a puppet. He wanted power. He wanted to prove that a star could control the narrative, bend the system, and make something his own. For Hollywood's old guard, that was unacceptable. And so, the machine began to move. Quietly, methodically, his name started disappearing from projects that once would have been his automatically. Roles were handed to other actors. Meetings got postponed. Agents stopped calling back. The label was whispered in every corner of town. Difficult to work with. Even Joel Silver, the legendary producer who'd stood by Bruce through the chaos of Die Hard, backed away after the fallout. Their friendship crumbled, and with it, Bruce's strongest ally in the industry. The punishment was subtle, but devastating. Death by 1,000 cuts. He hadn't just lost money. He lost trust. And in Hollywood, trust is currency. By Christmas of 1991, Bruce Willis had gone from the world's most bankable star to a man no one wanted to touch. The blacklist wasn't written on paper, but might as well have been carved in stone. And when Die Hard 3 went into pre-production, Bruce discovered the unthinkable. He wasn't even invited back to the franchise that made him a legend. Hollywood had drawn its line in the sand, and Bruce Willis had just become their example. Bruce Willis didn't take the blacklist lying down. He fought, he pushed back, and for a brief moment, it looked like he might beat the machine. When Quentin Tarantino cast him in Pulp Fiction in 1994, Bruce roared back into the spotlight. His performance as Butch the Boxer reminded critics that he wasn't just a wisecracking action star. He was an actor with grit and depth. The film's success revived his credibility, but it also came with a message. Bruce was no longer the headliner. He was part of the ensemble. From then on, his career looked like a pendulum. One year, brilliance. 12 Monkeys in 1995, The Fifth Element in 1997. The next year, disaster. Striking Distance, Color of Night, Mercury Rising. Hollywood wasn't giving him steady hits anymore. They were giving him tests, proving grounds. And every flop was ammunition for those whispering that he was unreliable. Then came the breaking point, Broadway Brawler. On paper, it was a safe Disney rom-com. But once filming began, Bruce allegedly took over the set. He fired the director, the cinematographer, even the costume designer. Millions of Disney's dollars burned away, until the studio pulled the plug entirely. Bruce had left them with nothing but a $17 million hole. Disney struck back hard. They slapped him with a lawsuit, a career-ending move for most actors. But Bruce negotiated a brutal deal. He'd star in 3 Disney films for a fraction of his usual pay. That deal gave us Armageddon and The Sixth Sense, 2 massive hits that ironically kept his career alive. But make no mistake, the machine had won. Even his victories came at the cost of humiliation. By the year 2000, Bruce Willis was no longer the untouchable king of the box office. He was a man Hollywood tolerated, not celebrated. He could still headline films, yes, but always under the shadow of being difficult, a star who might blow up a production if things didn't go his way. And the system wasn't finished with him yet. The real exploitation was still to come. By the mid-2010s, Bruce Willis's career had drifted into strange, unsettling territory. The man who once ruled global box offices was now appearing in a flood of low-budget films most people had never even heard of. Titles like Out of Death, Cosmic Sin, and American Siege cluttered streaming platforms and bargain bins. They weren't blockbusters. They were what insiders cruelly nicknamed geezer teasers. Here's how the scheme worked. Producers paid Bruce around $2 million for just 2 days of work. They shot all his scenes in one location, usually a warehouse, an office, or a generic set. His lines were fed to him through earpieces or written on cue cards. And when the movie came out, the posters screamed Bruce Willis, even though he was barely in the film. The trick wasn't about storytelling. It was about selling his name overseas before audiences realized the truth. Behind the curtain, something far more sinister was happening. Crew members whispered that Bruce seemed confused, even lost. He'd forget lines. He'd need constant guidance. Directors were quietly told to cut his dialogue, shorten his days, and avoid pairing him in scenes with too many other actors. On Out of Death in 2021, the screenwriter was ordered to slash 20 pages of Bruce's role overnight. Director Mike Burns admitted he had to squeeze all of Bruce's work into a single day because the star couldn't handle more. Jesse V. Johnson, who directed him in White Elephant, later confessed that after one day on set, he knew something was very wrong. Yet instead of protecting him, the machine doubled down. Between 2020 and 2022, Bruce appeared in more than 20 of these hollow cash grabs. The Golden Raspberry Awards even created a special category mocking him. Worst performance by Bruce Willis in a 2021 movie. 8 of his films were nominated in a single year. What the public didn't know was that this wasn't laziness, arrogance, or ego. It was illness. The forgotten lines, the shortened workdays, the vacant expressions. They were early symptoms of a brain disease that was already stealing Bruce Willis piece by piece. But the machine didn't care. Hollywood had once punished Bruce for being too ambitious. Now, they were exploiting him for being too vulnerable. And the truth, the devastating truth, was about to come crashing into the open. When Bruce Willis's family announced his retirement in March 2022, the industry finally had to face what insiders had known for years. Bruce was sick. The official diagnosis, aphasia, later clarified as frontotemporal dementia, explained the forgotten lines, the glassy expressions, the strange career choices. The world reacted with shock, sorrow, and, for many fans, guilt. Those cheap streaming films that seemed like jokes suddenly looked like evidence of abuse. The news sent ripples through Hollywood. How could one of the biggest stars on the planet have been paraded through dozens of bargain bin movies while clearly struggling with a degenerative brain disease? Who allowed it? Who profited? The uncomfortable truth was that studios, agents, and producers had kept cashing checks while Bruce's condition worsened. It sparked a new conversation. How does Hollywood treat its aging legends? Stars like Nicolas Cage, John Travolta, and Al Pacino had all done low-budget cash grabs. But Bruce's case felt different. It wasn't just survival or a paycheck. It was exploitation. The machine had found a way to squeeze value out of a man who no longer fully understood what was happening. Fans rallied around him. Old clips of moonlighting resurfaced. Die Hard was rewatched as if it were sacred scripture. Tributes poured in, not just from Hollywood colleagues, but from ordinary people who had grown up with his movies. Suddenly, the narrative wasn't about the flops. It was about the decades of laughter, thrills, and grit he had given audiences. Even the Razzie Awards backtracked. Within days of his retirement announcement, they rescinded their mocking worst performance category. Public shame flipped into collective regret. The joke was over. The world realized Bruce Willis wasn't a punchline. He was a victim of an industry that had once crowned him king, then sold him out when he was weakest. His decline also forced fans to confront their own complicity. For years, we had clicked on trailers, rolled our eyes at the laziness, and dismissed Bruce as washed up. Now we knew the truth. What we were watching wasn't arrogance, it was illness. And so his legacy began to shift. Not as the star who overstayed his welcome, but as the man who gave everything to Hollywood, only to have Hollywood take too much in return. Bruce Willis was never supposed to fade quietly. He was the everyman who walked barefoot across broken glass. The wisecracking underdog who made us believe ordinary people could be heroes. For decades, he embodied toughness. Unshakable, unstoppable. But in the end, his greatest battle wasn't on a movie screen. It was against a disease that no script, no stunt, no punchline could overcome. Hollywood built him up, tore him down, exploited him, and finally abandoned him. Yet even through the machine's cruelty, Bruce's spirit endured. His family, Emma, Demi, Rumor, Tallulah, Scout, and Evelyn, stood by him when the spotlight dimmed. They became his voice when his own words faltered. And in that loyalty, fans saw something more powerful than any blockbuster: love. The tragedy of Bruce Willis isn't just that dementia took away his craft. It's that we, as an audience, watched his decline without realizing it. We laughed at the cheap thrillers. We mocked the trailers. We called him lazy, washed up, past his prime. And only later did we see the truth. Those films weren't failures of effort. They were symptoms of a disease that was already claiming him. But legacies aren't written in the final act. Bruce's will not be measured by the geezer teasers or the gossip. It will be defined by the moments that electrified the world. The smirk in Moonlighting, the rooftop showdown in Die Hard, the haunting twist of The Sixth Sense, the tears in Armageddon. That is Bruce Willis, a man who gave cinema some of its most unforgettable moments. A man who, even when the industry punished him, kept fighting. A man who reminded us that heroes aren't perfect. They're flawed, fragile, human. And maybe that's the real lesson. Bruce Willis was never John McClane. He was never unbreakable. He was just a man. And in the end, that's what made him legendary. So the next time you hear yippee-ki-yay, don't think of Hollywood's cruelty. Think of resilience. Think of family. Think of a man who refused to quit, even when his body betrayed him. Bruce Willis may be gone from our screens, but his fight, his legacy, will live forever.